everybody, and welcome back to the ultimate fashion history for what's slowly becoming a seasonal tradition. Yes, it's our annual holiday episode of Fave Film Fashion, and this time we're going back to 1945 to spend Christmas in Connecticut. And I dedicate this episode to every member of the UFH Facebook group, all 1,600 of you, and everyone who has subscribed to this little channel, all, 15,000 of you. So, let's go. One of my favorite movies. Christmas in Connecticut, of course, starred Barbara Stanwyck. It also starred Dennis Morgan and the incomparable Sidney Greenstreet, such a great character actor. It was directed by Peter Godfrey, and it came out in August 1945, which was just a month or so before VJ Day. So not only did it come out in summer, but this really is a home front war movie. And so by the time it actually circulated to most American cinemas, the war was over. But it did still resonate very strongly with people, especially the part about the returning serviceman. Barbara Stanwyck is absolutely delightful in Christmas in Connecticut. It's a screwball comedy, and the character she plays is not unlike the character she played in The Lady Eve. And I think that she's so versatile because only the previous year she played the incomparably evil Phyllis Dietrichson in Double Indemnity, which is also a subject of a Fave Film Fashion here on the Ultimate Fashion History. The costumes for both of these movies were, of course, created by Barbara Stanwyck's favorite designer, the legendary Edith Head. Barbara Stanwyck had it written into all of her movie contracts that Edith Head would do her costumes. In fact, Christmas in Connecticut was a Warner Brothers movie. Edith was contracted to Paramount, and Paramount loaned her out to do the costumes. The reason that Barbara Stanwyck loved Edith Head so much is that the first time they worked together on The Lady Eve, prior to that, Barbara Stanwyck didn't really have much interest in clothing or fashion and didn't realize the possibilities of clothing. As many of you probably know, Edith Head was known as the clothes doctor. She could tailor clothes to fix people's problems. And incidentally, Edith Head also did the costumes for last year's holiday episode, White Christmas. Well, as I just mentioned, Edith Head was on loan from Paramount, and take a look at this title card from the beginning of the movie. Miss Stanwyck's gowns by Edith Head, gowns by Milo Anderson. Milo Anderson was one of the costumiers contracted to Warner Brothers, so he did all the other costumes, but we're just going to focus on Barbara Stanwyck's wardrobe here because it's so beautiful. Now, I just mentioned that Edith was known as the clothes doctor, and she could correct problems, body problems that were very evident on the screen. And Barbara Stanwyck had a very long torso and evidently quite a low and flat bottom. And this made other costume designers quite afraid of putting her in straight skirts or in pants because on screen they felt that it would accentuate these issues. Edith was such a genius, she fixed this. You'll notice, take a look here, in nearly every movie that Barbara Stanwyck is in that's costumed by Edith Head, Edith does something very clever to create an optical illusion. The front of the waistband on her pants or on her dresses is much deeper than at the back. Take a look here, bit of a detail. This is a very, very clever piece of tailoring. Through tailoring, she raises Barbara's bottom and also shortens her torso. So this is one of the many reasons that Barbara Stanwyck loved Edith Head, but the other reason is that Edith Head always costumed to character, and Barbara Stanwyck was an actress above all things. She was an actress par excellence. She was more interested in being an actress than being a star. And so they had a wonderful working relationship, evidently, where they would talk about the character, a character's motivation, character arc in a movie, and they would work together, and Edith would costume according to the character, not according to the whims of a star. And Barbara Stanwyck liked that. Christmas in Connecticut is a delightful, funny movie. If you haven't seen it, see it. It's really wonderful. Take a look here. So far, so good. It's that double trouble dame. It's that God is my co-pilot guy. They're having the time of their love life in the teasing and squeezing hit of the season. Basically, the plot is thus. Barbara Stanwyck plays a sort of 1940s Martha Stewart character. America's greatest cook, America's greatest mother, America's greatest homemaker, and she has a popular monthly feature in a popular magazine. But of course, it's all bogus. She can't cook, she isn't married, she isn't a mother, she's a working writer living in New York, and her whole character, Elizabeth Lane, is a complete farce. She's getting away with it until, as a publicity stunt for her publisher, played by Sidney Greenstreet, a returning war hero is going to spend Christmas at her Connecticut farmhouse, of course, played by the incomparably handsome and dashing all-American type, Dennis Morgan. So of course she has to borrow a farmhouse, and all kinds of hilarity ensue, because of course she has to find a husband and rustle up a baby. And in the process of all of this hilarity, the two fall in love. So it's your basic screwball comedy, but with a really sort of patriotic home front feel. When we first meet Barbara's character, Elizabeth Lane, she is at work in her little New York apartment and wearing a fabulous working-at-home outfit. This one, a white blouse with a deep V-neck, huge bishop sleeves, slacks, and that cheetah belt. Absolutely fantastic. This, by the way, is how I dress at home when I'm grading papers, just so you know. Wardrobe plays a very important role in setting her character up. Actually, in the first few minutes of the movie, Elizabeth Lane receives a package. It's a Christmas present to herself. This huge and luxurious mink coat. Now, of course, traditionally, especially in movies of the era, it would be a man who would give a lady a mink coat, but she bought it herself, and she makes it very clear that it would take 6 months worth of wages for her to pay it off. But it kind of sets her up as this very spunky, independent woman, and not this homemaker character that the American public thinks she is. But take a look at that coat. It is massive. It is huge. Of course, the 40s were the era of the massive, massive shoulder pads, but everything about this coat is massive. Look at those enormous rolled bell sleeves. Sometimes the shoulder pads take up the whole frame in Christmas in Connecticut. Have any of you ever tried on a vintage 1940s coat? I have, and what I don't understand is they look completely reasonable in movies of the era, but when you actually try one on, it's ridiculous. I ordered from eBay a few years ago a 1940s coat. It was faux fur, and when I put it on, I looked like a yeti. It was the most ridiculous thing I have ever had on my body, and yet look how wonderful Barbara looks. In another early scene set in New York in a restaurant, Barbara wears this extraordinary jacket with this very interesting novelty detail. Here it is up close, this chain detail around the neck. Now, during the war years, trim was very difficult to come by. Trim traditionally was produced in Europe, and of course Europe was at war. Rationing, things like brocade, for example, had to be used on uniforms, dress uniforms. And so you find in the 1940s a lot of novelty trim created either out of embroidery, with embroidery, or from fabric. And I believe that this isn't embroidery. I think that this is fabric applique to give this effect. You find an awful lot of novelty ideas in the 1940s, especially in terms of trim, accessories, hats, shoes, bracelets, Bakelite necklaces. Why? Well, because Accessories weren't rationed, and I know that this isn't an accessory I'm talking about now, but I think it's always worth noting that one of the reasons that accessories became so outrageous in the 40s is because they were not rationed. Why not? Because Roosevelt said that women were doing such a good job in the factories or in the services or running their homes that it would be good for morale if they could have wonderful hats. And also, I think novelty and whimsy and a bit of silliness in fashion during the war years really did take the edge off a little bit and remind people that they could keep their spirits up and have a little fun even in such dreadful times. But getting back to this idea of 1940s, at least wartime 1940s trim, often being created out of fabric, we see it here with this extraordinary chain detail, but we see it again later in the movie. The trim on this absolutely beautiful crepe jacket is made with tiny little loops of fabric, absolutely gorgeous and totally on the ration. Interestingly, sequins weren't so hard to come by because we don't often see servicemen wearing sequins, do we? At least not while they're on duty. And so this accounts for the beautiful sequin embroidery there on the bodice. While faking her way through making breakfast in her borrowed farmhouse, Barbara Stanwyck wears this wonderful pinafore dress in gingham with a covered gingham belt. Now, of course, gingham is very mumsy, it's very homesy, it's very cozy, but I'd like to make the note on gingham and its popularity in the 1940s. Gingham was one of the most popular textiles for day wear in the 40s and sometimes evening wear as well. Look, there's Katharine Hepburn in the Philadelphia Story 1940 in gingham. There's good old Joan Crawford in Mildred Pierce in gingham, and look how earnest she is with her pie. I know that my friend Carmangelo is going to be swooning at this picture. Huge Joan Crawford fan, as am I. But gingham was also used in high fashion. This is Adrienne's Bustle dress from, I think, 1944. Don't kill me if I'm wrong, if you know the answer. I think it's 1944. And of course, Claire McCardell's popover dress in gingham. So gingham was a hot textile, and it worked very well with the narrative of the movie, but it was also very, as we say today, on trend. Ooh, I don't like that expression. Let's move on to the War Bond Drive Christmas dance and take a look at Barbara's wardrobe here. This fabulous fitted wool jacket with a diamond check with a little sequin at the center of each diamond, a covered belt, and a big velvet, I believe it's velvet bow, teamed with a long black skirt. And here's a detail. And again, with this outfit, we see the clothes doctor at work. Take a look at the peplum on the jacket. Because Edith had decided to ruche it at the back, it makes it higher at the back than at the front, which of course had the effect of lifting Barbara's bum. Now, all of the images I'm using on this slide, I took without permission. I'm sorry, guilty as charged, from a website that I want to tell all of you guys about. It's called Blonde at the Film. This is the URL, blondeatthefilm.com, and it's run by an incredibly smart lady called Cameron, who's a movie historian and a writer and understands clothes and film fashion and costume so expertly and writes about it so beautifully. You have to check out Cameron's site, Blonde at the Film. She's our kind of person. Role model for me, absolutely. So, this jacket, to get back to the plot, is wool, and you can tell it's wool if you really zoom in. And this really speaks to Edith Head's narrative sense. This is Christmas. It's in Connecticut. This is a barn dance. And if all of this was happening in real life, the Elizabeth Lane character would have worn wool. It's cold in a barn. at Christmas time in Connecticut. Can you imagine how hot this must have been under studio lights, especially in a dancing scene? But Edith really understood textiles and that you can't fake textiles. They don't move in the same way if you try to substitute wool for something else. She wanted that kind of stiffness that comes with wool. And I love Edith Head for this reason, and I'm sure that Barbara Stanwyck didn't complain at all, because she also loved Edith Head for these reasons. Her attention to detail and perfectionism, and this idea that Edith Head always had, that you shouldn't try to fake things. She corrected things, but she never faked anything. Although I do feel sorry for Barbara Stanwyck in her long hairpiece and this tight, hot woolen coat dancing under studio lights. It's a great outfit, isn't it? But not as great as this one. I think this is probably the most famous piece of kit from Christmas in Connecticut. This long black gown, I have no idea what it's made of, themed with that little white jacket with what looks like some sort of wool. It's not fur, I don't think, around the bodice and on those little pockets. Here's a close-up. Another outfit I love in Christmas in Connecticut is this one. Bedtime, and this is Barbara Stanwyck's Robe. Isn't it gorgeous? Silk with padded shoulders and a chiffon scarf at the waist and at the neck. Another outfit I love is the skirt suit that Barbara wears in the concluding scene. I'm not sure what it's made of, maybe crepe. But here is another shot with a little scooped bolero and the slightly A-line skirt with the ruffled cuffs showing at the wrist. I love that suit. I always like to talk about jewellery, if I can, because often it's so small on the screen you can't see it. But Barbara wears some lovely jewellery in Christmas in Connecticut, like these gold and enamel square earrings that echo so nicely the diamond check on her wool jacket. And also these diamond earrings that have a very interesting feature. They're rectangles with this diamond-encrusted bar at the bottom. Very strange, but quite lovely. But what I like best in the jewellery department is the large diamond ring she wears on her pinky finger. Here it is in close-up, and you can see it's formed as a horseshoe, I believe. Wearing big diamond or various other jeweled rings on the pinky finger is one of my favorite things, but it also seems to have been quite the thing in the 40s, because in Now Voyager, Betty Davis wears a huge diamond encrusted ring on her pinky finger as well. I think that's diamonds and sapphires. So this was definitely a 40s thing. And by the way, I am still working on my Fave Film Fashion Now Voyager. I've been working on it for about 18 months now. And the reason it's taking so long is because A, it's my favourite movie, B, it has my favourite movie costumes by Ori Kelly, of course, and C, it's like looking at the sun. Now Voyager, the costumes in Now Voyager are so epic, so important. The whole story is told through costume. How can I possibly do it justice? But I will, one of these days, finish Now Voyager. Speaking of accessories, we have to talk about this wonderful chiffon scarf, just dotted here and there with paillettes. It's so beautiful. I love headscarves worn in this way. And what I noticed when I was watching Christmas in Connecticut this afternoon is that it's actually ruched at the back. There is a seam that goes down the back. I couldn't grab a screenshot of it for you, but there's a ruched seam going down the back of the scarf, so it really is a headscarf where you can put it on and it kept that wonderful shape. I love this. Well, although this series is entitled Fave Film Fashion, homeware counts as fashion, doesn't it? Interiors count as fashion, and I have to talk about the set for the old stone farmhouse. If it looks familiar to you, it's probably because you also saw it in Bringing Up Baby. It was the same set, and don't you love Cary Grant's peignoir there? Anyway, in both of these movies, particularly in Christmas in Connecticut, the set design, the interior of the farmhouse, was in the colonial revival style. And it was such a perfect example that as part of the publicity pitch for Christmas in Connecticut, the studio sent this out to magazines and newspapers. That is a picture of the set. Use this attractive still as feature for home furnishings page. Here's another seasonal set that you might recognize. This is, of course, the inn from Holiday Inn. Again, in the colonial revival style, so popular in this era. Now, of course, there had always been colonial touches in American design, for those who liked it, from the turn of the century onwards, but it was really in the late 30s and then throughout the 40s and a little bit beyond that people went colonial mad, and there's a couple of reasons for this. One, the restoration of colonial Williamsburg in the 30s and 40s really captured the imagination, but moreover, in times of terrible turmoil, for example, the Great Depression, the rise of fascism, and then, of course, World War II, people really did have this interest in America itself, the founding fathers, patriotism, returning to the foundation of our very nation. It was all part of the same spirit. And when we think about the 1940s in terms of interior design, it really went in one of two directions. You could either be modernist or you would be colonial revivalist. Or sometimes people mixed them up a little bit, which is kind of interesting. Take a look at this. This is from a Sears catalogue in the early 1940s. Look at all of that colonial American style stuff. Sometimes it would be spun to Pennsylvania Dutch. Goodness, that is Pennsylvanian Dutch, isn't it? Too much so. But in every one of these 1940s homes, you'd find little accoutrements from the 18th century, spinning wheels or rocking chairs or bed warmers, things like that. Another movie interior from a movie I should definitely do as a Fave Film Fashion, Leave Her to Heaven. But look, completely colonial revival. Colonial revivalism in interiors actually bled into the 1950s. Take a look at the inn in White Christmas with those colonial chairs. It was very usual in this era to find something like this in a person's home. But I always think that the colonial revival sort of bled into the Hollywood Regency style of the 50s and 1960s, which is one of my favorite moments in furniture and homeware. It's so glamorous. By the way, if any of you are looking for last-minute Christmas gift ideas for me, how about this? I saw this chair quite recently at Design Within Reach. Well, it's not within my reach. Isn't it gorgeous? A perfect example of Hollywood Regency. The metal part of the chair is actually gold plate. Just so you know, this little chair costs $7,000, and I want 6 of them, so budget accordingly. Christmas in Connecticut opened in August 1945, one of the hottest months. But take a look at this. Tomorrow is Christmas in Connecticut. In Connecticut tomorrow, unique statewide Christmas party for redeployed soldiers. The governor of Connecticut declared a sort of unofficial holiday to tie in with the movie's release. But movies were released very differently then. They would open in places like New York and Los Angeles and Chicago, and in this case in Connecticut. But then it would take weeks and sometimes even months for new releases to reach the smaller movie houses throughout the country. So a lot of people did see Christmas in Connecticut at Christmas time, but not the people who saw it here. Isn't this a wonderful piece of copy? Brr, it's August. Murray Howard, manager of the Palace Theatre, South Norwalk, established a cool atmosphere on his theatre front when he played Christmas in Connecticut as the centre of a citywide celebration held there recently. Christmas in Connecticut was a big hit with moviegoers, and of course it tied in with a lot of advertising A Star is Bathed, using mild, soothing Menon antiseptic baby oil, of course, by Barbara Stanwyck and Dennis Morgan in the wonderful Warner Brothers movie Christmas in Connecticut. The public loved it, and many of the critics did too, but not the New York Times. In their review, they were scathing. Here's just some of it. Christmas in Connecticut undoubtedly comes under the heading of sophisticated comedy, that being the accepted term for entertainment which depends not so much on genuine humour as upon suggestive lines and situations for its merriment. Bah humbug. Maybe the New York Times would have preferred the movie if it had actually starred the actress who was originally cast to play Elizabeth Lane. Who was that? I'm sure many of you know. Bette Davis. She was signed to play the role 2 months before filming began, and for reasons that I haven't been able to discover, she was replaced by Barbara Stanwyck. If any of you know the reason, please drop me a line because I am dying to know. What would it have been like with Bette Davis? I think it would have been great. Bette Davis was wonderful. She's always wonderful. But it would have been a very different movie, and it's very hard for me to think of Christmas in Connecticut without thinking of Barbara Stanwyck, because she was so delightful, so charming, so lovely, and it's really she who makes this such a classic Christmas movie. If you know the answer to any of my many questions, you can contact me through my website, amandahalley.com. Join our Facebook group. By the way, we have 1,600 members now, and none of the Facebook group, the UFH Facebook group, would be possible without this lady, Kendall, who runs the UFH Facebook group, moderates it. Kendall, thank you so much. You are such a huge integral part of UFH. I don't know what I'd do without you. And so this brings us not only to the end of this episode, but to the end of the UFH year. It has been quite a year for the Ultimate Fashion History. We began 2017 with about 5,000 subscribers. We ended it with over 15,000 subscribers. The Ultimate Fashion History group was started on Facebook in January of this year with one member, me, and now we have over 1,600 members, so thank you all. I hope you've had a good year. I've had a great year, and it's all because of UFH. So, me and Django, I wish you all a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and have a wonderful and fashionable 2018.